Welcome to the Cincinnati Art Museum's Cam Look. Every Tuesday and Thursday, a staff member or volunteer will share an object from the permanent collection and pose questions for discussion. Check back every Tuesday and Thursday at 10 a.m. for a new work and a new conversation. Hi, I'm Helen, a docent at the Art Museum, and today we have a real treat. New information about our beloved Damascus room. Come on in. Today, I'm with Dr. Anke Scharrahs, a specialist in Syrian architecture, who has been here for the past week at the museum evaluating our beloved Damascus room. So now I'm going to talk to her. We've got 3 questions we hope you'll like too. Our first one is asking her what were the 3 most fascinating things she learned as she was studying this room this week.
Yeah, the first thing that occurred to me was the high quality of the paintings, seeing them in real life now, not just from photographs, because like the flower vases behind me, the quality of the paintings is just pretty high. So it means that the room was made for a wealthy household who could afford like expensive artists to hire.
And that's why you wore flowers today on your shirt.
I wear Damascene roses, but the modern versions. I don't compete with the painted ones.
There you go.
nor the real ones. So
okay.
Yeah. And it's fascinating as well that if you look at the different vases that are painted, so it's interesting to see from where people in Damascus took their inspirations for what would be valuable enough to be painted in their most important room of the house. So it could be like Indian objects or China, or like some vases painted in Iznik style or made in Iznik, like Iznik ceramics. So it's just fascinating to see which particular piece the owner builder chose together with the artisan to paint it on the walls, because they negotiated what to put as a decoration for their room, of course.
Of course, they were commissioning and they were paying for it.
Exactly, yeah. And talking about pattern and having like pattern books in a way or stencils to choose from. So, and that's fascinating to see always in each of the rooms that I was able to examine, to see who chose what.
Right. Well, the other fascinating thing for me is all those international connections. So we're talking about China, we're talking about Iran, did you say?
Yeah.
Iraq?
Because Damascus was one of the 2 like final points of the Silk Road in a way, before getting the trade over the Mediterranean to like Italy, France, or even Egypt. So and Damascus was until 200 years ago an important city of science, of commerce, of scholarship, of music. So, and you find all these influences on the art that was produced in the city.
So because there was a lot of wealth there then.
A lot of wealth because of the merchants, of course. As well, it was a gathering point for the pilgrimage to Mecca, because it was the last city before the caravan headed south through the desert. So it was like an important gathering place. So each year between 30,000 and 100,000 people gathered in the city, and, forming the caravans south to Mecca. So, and that's why, all the Muslims from all over the world, including Africa, China, wherever they lived, came via the pilgrimage routes, gathering in either Cairo or Damascus. So it's pretty important. And they would all gather in the houses of the wealthy merchants in such type of reception rooms, because, making their business on the way, paying their pilgrimage. They need to sell stuff, and they brought goods from the countries they came from or what they bought on the way. So that's also like, coming from everywhere.
So it was a working pilgrimage.
In a way, yeah. As well as, from merchants from all over the world of this time.
Well, you didn't have credit cards?
No, they had even no banks yet, but they had like families who were always like the moneylenders, and they had like one cousin sitting in Cairo, the next one in Damascus, then another one in Baghdad, Isfahan, up to China, as well as to England. So this is how they finance, as far as I know, their their
and probably
commercial
exchange
things. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
coinage too.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Armenians often were the tradespeople as well. So yeah, I just don't know that much about it, but certain things I learned by, being interested in these rooms and the background and function.
Well, sure. Where does this design come from? Where does that design come from?
And also how it, I mean, it's private rooms in private houses. I was always fascinated by why and how they decorated it, not only the materials, being a conservator and being interested in historic painting techniques, but as well about, why they choose particular pattern or colors or inscriptions, because the most important decoration of these rooms, it's inscriptions. Could be either Arabic lettering, often in gold or copper leaf, but also Christian and Jewish houses had inscriptions, then in Hebrew, but it's often poems that were chosen, often by medieval poets, 12th century, like Al-Busiri, Al-Ghazali, some of these famous poets.
So we're talking
scholars.
500 years later, they're picking up poetry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. So, and it's also very fascinating, because if you have one room with like 10 up to 20 inscription panels, and you have thousands of poems to choose from, so it's interesting what the particular owner choose to have written on the walls of his most important room in the house.
Mm-hmm. And just picking up from what you and I talked about before we started filming, many of the rooms in Damascus would have been bigger than this room right here.
Yeah.
So 10 to 20 panels was not
No, we have 8
crowding.
here. No. The size of the reception room always also relates to the wealth of the family, because the more affluent they are, the larger the house is, including the courtyards, the size of the rooms inside, as well as the decoration. So, and what I can tell from the panels that I used here, that everything is quite high quality. So all the pieces came from high quality rooms. So it means from affluent families. It's not average, it's really high quality.
And it would be very artists who were probably pretty in demand because they had such skills.
Yeah.
Okay. So first thing
and it's all handmade, of course, because you couldn't go to like a store buying paint.
I want this poem. I want that poem.
Yeah, and not the poem. Yeah, we found marks on the backside of the inscription panels as well, because the whole wood would be fabricated in a carpenter's shop, of course.
Oh, yes.
And then they mark the order of the panels to be mounted later in the house. And the inscription panels would be sent to the calligrapher to have the calligraphy written in a nice way. And then the panels with the calligraphy written would go to the painter's workshop, and then they would put like the raised ornaments on it, would do the gilding, would paint all the ornaments, and then they would go mounting it in the house. This like the basic procedure.
Okay, so high quality, number one. Number two, the decorations that are here. And what's the third thing that's so fascinating?
Yeah, the variety of metal leaves used. You can see some of the spots that look like gold. It's actually gold leaf. And if you spot some silvery surface, it's tin leaf. They used tin leaf to overlay certain areas. And then they paint with yellow, orange, red, and green glaze, which was like a transparent color. So making these kind of effects of like greenish, yellowish, glossy surface. And then the central areas, like the cartouches with flower vases, would be painted with tempera paint that has a satiny surface. So it's not so glossy like the metal surfaces. And then we have a fascinating material that's been used for the background of the fruit panels, for example, as well as for the inscriptions. It's blue glass powder called smalt. So originally the backgrounds would have been bright blue. So we can spot it in certain tiny damages. So the color scheme originally would have been much brighter. And now it's covered by varnish layers that were applied to protect the surfaces, like in the 20th century. But these materials are made by natural resin, and they age and dark by time. So the whole room is much darker now than it was sold to Andrew Jergens, for example, 90 years ago. So this conceals, in a way, the original bright paint layers.
The color palette.
Yeah, the color palette.
The color palette would. I'm looking at one of the panels right now over your head, and I'm trying to imagine it with that bright blue on it, and it's
bright blue and pink and
pink.
Yeah, pink, light blue, like a malachite green.
Oh, I
so
love malachite
it's just
green.
And I was really amazed when seeing it closely, because the condition of the paint decoration is just extremely high, so it's not damaged by time yet. So yeah, it's just fascinating to see.
We're very lucky.
Yeah, extremely lucky. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because when I traveled to Syria to do research, fieldwork on these houses, I found that most of the houses had been repainted, rearranged, washed off, sanded off. Just very, very few survived with their, or with even parts of the original surface decoration intact. So it's a jewel that you have here in Cincinnati.
That's great. Okay. I want to give credit to the Cincinnati Asian Art Society, whose members have funded Dr. Scharrahs' visit here with us and her report. Dr. Scharrahs also will be working with the Asian Art Society to do a Zoom presentation when the final report is done, and share that with us so that all of us will learn more about this amazing, amazing room. So thank you for being on Cam Look today with us.
Yeah, and thank you for having me here.
Good.
So,